All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have a special treat with you today. We have a interview with Colt Cabana. Welcome, Colt.
Hey, I'm a special treat.
Well, definitely, this is actually going to be the first time that we have a midweek show published, just for the special topic of having you on the show, as well as your upcoming project, the Wrestling Road Diaries. But before we get into that, so the Chicago Cubs won the World Series this week. How did you react? How did you feel about that as a longtime Chicago Cubs fan and Chicago native?
Yeah, I've been going to the game since I was a little kid. When I was 16 years old, I won a contest to play catch with a Cub. And just kind of funny because there was I forgot the options. It was like Mark Gray, Sammy Sosa, maybe even like Maddox or somebody. And I got the catcher, Scott Service, who was. But I still got to go on the field and play catch with Scott Service, and I met like Fergie Jenkins, and it's really cool. It's a place I've been around my whole life. My mother's a diehard Cubs fan. She's 70 years old, and I went and watched the game with her, Game 7, and it was just really something. It was something special to share with my family, and also a city that obviously can't really believe what's going on. You know, I watched the game Wednesday night, and then I had to fly out at a 6:45 a.m. flight Thursday to Ring of Honor. So sadly, I spent Thursday, Friday, and Saturday and Sunday in Texas. So sadly, I wasn't able to take in the festivities. But I'm super grateful that I was able to be in the city the night they won.
Yeah, I was actually, my next question was just going to be if you were able to be there. But I think one of the coolest parts is seeing people, celebrate with their families and all of that who have been there, been through all the hardships. That's a great part about sports,
So many hardships. Oh my God.
Do you follow?
Good.
Do you follow any teams as closely as you do the Cubs, or is that like your number one kind of go-to?
Well, I honestly wouldn't say I'm like a diehard follow of the Cubs. I'll go to games all the time, and I'll keep up with the Cubs. I follow them on Twitter, but I'm not really a diehard sports fan. I'd say when I started wrestling on, as an independent wrestler, you're wrestling on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I kind of had to stop. I wasn't watching wrestling, or I wasn't watching sports anymore, and I was missing all the Bears games, and I kind of slowly faded away from the sports scene. But I'll always support the Chicago teams. But the Cubs have always had a special place in my heart. So they're not maybe my number one or maybe my only,
You talked about being on the road, this week and for as soon as you started wrestling and all of that. And, that's always been one of the most fascinating parts to the fans is, the behind the scenes, the on the road. And you gave us, in my mind, the first insight into those travels with the Wrestling Road Diaries. And, on the first one you had Bryan Danielson and Sal Rinauro. It logged Bryan Danielson's, journey to WWE. The second edition, you had Luke Gallows and Cliff Compton, who, had recently left WWE, and we got a different side of the travels, and, that it's not always so glorious, but, the struggle to get there, and now everyone is back to where they want to be. But now you've talked about how important this third one is, where you've brought in Grado and Kiko Taro, who are two of the, more comedic wrestlers in the business. And can you talk about what that was like and why that was so important to you?
Well, you hit it on the head, and I appreciate you saying that. We were, I was one of the first ones to give you an insight, because I truly believe that. And Brian and I, when we put the first one together, when we had that idea, it was the idea that unless you're really, really, really a part of the independent wrestling scene, you only just hear the word independent wrestling. You really don't know what that world is all about. And remember, at that point, we were independent stars, so that was the nicer part of independent wrestling, and it wasn't that nice, obviously.
I wasn't sure quite how to phrase that when I was asking the question, because I noticed that it was the Ring of Honors and those sorts of independents, and then with the Gallows and Compton, it was more of the not so name brand. You guys talk about it on the diaries, going to these backwoods towns.
On that first one, we did a little mix of everything. There was a show at CTWE and where I wrestled Tommaso Ciampa in front of like 80 people.
You told him he had no soul, right?
Yeah. It was birthday. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that first one was a real look at like all the whole spectrum of it, and that was what we wanted to give the fans. And so so all of them have been like, hey, this is what our weird world is like, and I want to introduce everybody to independent wrestling, not for bad, just to really show you what it's like. And so, you nailed it. The first one, that was kind of like, this is what our life is. The second one was like, hey, how do you come back from being in WWE into the independents? And then this one is comedy wrestling, and it's something that hasn't been dissected in a documentary form, not that I know of, to this extent. And we really break it down, and it's as much a documentary about how life on the road as it is how to be a successful comedic wrestler, and almost how hard it is. And there's some really fun things in the movie where, like, we do jokes almost that don't work, and we kind of explain why they don't work, and we explain how hard it is, and we show, it's not only are we showing the stuff that's amazing, but we're showing the stuff that bombs too. And I think, it says something about all three of us that we're willing to put that on film or video to show every side of it. This isn't just the greatest hits. This is what it is.
And this took place in the United States.
Yeah, I finance these myself. I don't ask for a Kickstarter. I don't ask people for money. I do this myself. And so for this one, the first and second ones have been really good. So I knew I was able to, go out on a limb and put a little more money into it. And so I flew over Kikutaro from Japan, and I flew over Grado from Scotland, which weren't cheap tickets. And, also to pay him for the project too. So, but I thought, nothing like this would ever have happened, and so I wanted to do it. And we drove around the Midwest, and Grado. I mean, they both love America so much; it's so fun, especially the food. They both love to just eat.
So that was it. It must have been, I'm guessing the majority of the crowd's first real exposure to Grado and Kikutaro.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say half and half. A lot of them, because you got to remember, like, I'm promoting specifically that's happening on my podcast. So, half of them are my podcast fans that are coming out and that know these guys. And Grado's been such a fixture almost on my show and in my career a little bit as I go to Scotland every single August. So a lot of people know about Grado. And Kikutaro's a legend. He really is a Japanese wrestling legend. He's wrestled comedy matches in the Tokyo Dome in front of 50,000 people before. And so he's really like, it was a real presence. So I think half knew exactly who they were. Maybe a quarter were like, I think I've heard of these guys. And then a quarter, never heard of them.
All right.
So, part of your act or your kind of routine, I know you want to bring the comedy in, is being able to be kind of flexible in front of a crowd. And you actually started out as a teacher, and just to give the teachers the rub, because we're both involved in the education field, how did you kind of get into the teaching and move away from that into wrestling?
Well, I mean, I didn't start as a teacher. I started wrestling when I was in college, and so for 3 years I was wrestling while going to college. And kind of like my game plan was, and this is how dumb I was at 18. It was like, I'll do 4 years of college, and then when I'm done, I won't have to get a job. I'll just be in the WWE, and that's how that works. That just wasn't how it works, and so I had to get a job. And as Tracy Smothers says, you got to get a job to support your wrestling habit. So, I had a college education, so I was able to get I was a teaching assistant, and it was good because it was 9 to 3 or 8 to 3, and I was able to then have weekends off so I could wrestle, and have the summers off so I can wrestle, and then also, I piled up enough sick days and personal days that on a Friday or whatever if I had to go. And I remember one time, it's kind of weird because you want to be there for the kids, but also my passion in my heart was in wrestling. And I remember having to tell the principal, I'm going to have to take a sick day because I'm going over to England to do my first tour of England. And And like that was like kind of a moment. And also when I did that tour, or when I did that long weekend over there, it kind of hit me like, I think I'm ready to be a full-time wrestler if I'm able to, be flown over to London. And so that was kind of the moment where I transitioned into being a poor wrestler and teaching assistant to just a poor.
What kind of did you have any kind of crazy experiences with your students, or a really bad day that you that sticks out for you?
Not crazy. I worked with kids with I worked with special needs kids, and I was specifically a one-on-one with a kid with the Down syndrome, but he was high functioning. They were all high functioning. Mm-hmm. They were so much fun. These kids, and I always treasure the time with them. It's just like, and I always think back to it. It's just like I was not in a stressful place, but I didn't have any money, and I was a poor independent wrestler, and like these kids, man, like they have no worries in the world. Just everything is fun. Everything, like, it was and it might be where a lot of my positivity comes from, is that watching these kids just enjoy life and just go on. Like they had no worries in the world, man. This kid I worked with, he was just constantly singing Backstreet Boys and farting on it. It was the best.
Yeah, and then from there, not only did you kind of go into this career of professional wrestling, but really, and we thank you for being on our podcast, you became a pioneer in the podcasting world. What gave you the idea to start doing this, and the style you do it in?
Yeah, well, I think the style is might be the pioneer, and I appreciate you saying that. Because obviously, podcasting's been around. I did Wade Keller's Torch Talk the other day, and he's like, "We've been doing audio since 2004."
Oh,
I remember being in college. That must have been 1998 or 1999, and I remember like trying to play like Winamp audio files. Yeah. And try and like remember like I like sitting there and like wanting to hear something and wanting to hear like maybe it was, or I think it was like a radio station. I wanted to hear the radio from back home in Chicago because I went to school in Michigan. Mm-hmm. But and I think when iTunes put on the podcast feature, which I might be incorrect, but it was about 2007 or 2008. That's when people like realized the ability to use the for podcasting to be a thing. And I started mine in 2010. Which was, I always say it's the longest running wrestler to wrestler long form podcast. And, I know guys have tried it, were trying it in the past. And I remember like in the early 2000s, I think Tom Pritchard would do stuff like that and D'Lo Brown. Like I remember they always liked the idea of audio, but no one would ever stick with it. And no one ever really had good audio. It was always just, I think, I don't know, just calling in on a phone, like Blog Talk Radio or something. But, so comedians were talking with each other, and it was very comfortable, and I liked peeking in on those conversations, and I just figured, well, that's what I figured everyone would love that with wrestling too. And so, I always say that I was like, oh man, I can't wait for the wrestling version of this to come out, and then very quickly I was like, oh, I'll be the one to come out with it with the wrestling version, and that's what I did.
Is there a guest that you haven't had that you're still looking forward to, that you really want to have on your show at some point?
Well, there's always a couple. Like, Santino was on this week.
Yeah, that was great.
That was a guest I'd wanted forever. It really was. And so I was very happy and thankful that he would come on the show. And he wanted to do the show, which is exciting. And, I always say there was one in 2014, I think, I got invited down to the Performance Center, and they wanted me to do these. I was doing these voiceover stuff and commentary stuff, and I was supposed to do one with Robbie Brookside. I went there 3 weeks in a row, and each week he put me off. He's like, "Yeah, we'll do it next week. We'll do it next week," and we never did it. And that's kind of his. He wasn't doing it maliciously. He was just that's just him, which I know because I've known him since 2004. So that's one that I'd like to have Robbie on the show.
Cool. There's a signature train. So actually, the first show that I ever was able to drag my wife to was a Ring of Honor show where you were doing some of your comedy routine. And I will say that she trooped through the whole show.
Your wife shooped through something, and I said, "What the fuck does that mean?"
Oh, no, I meant like she was she trooped, like she stayed there for the entire event and acted as if she was completely into it. But the only match that I saw her really into was the match where you were working comedy stuff.
Yeah, and that's like the fun, like I see. I've been doing this for so long is that I'll see a lot of pushback sometimes of people being like, "Ugh, Cabana and his comedy stuff," but the reality is that there's always, man. I was on a show the other night and like this woman was just like, "Oh my God, you!" She's like, "This is my first time at wrestling," and like that's everything. That was the best. I can't believe it, and like, so I know like the people that have been around forever can get tired of it, but I know that like those first timers, like I know that's exactly something that would make them smile and be like, "Whoa, wrestling's awesome." And that's kind of why I still do it and love doing it, is that I know for every jaded wrestling fan that will shit on me, there's always the new wrestling fan that I help make a wrestling fan and bring them to independent wrestling and help them keep coming back.
And I definitely think that that's, the beauty of the comedy that you guys do in wrestling, which, now in Ring of Honor recently, you've, not that you've transitioned away from it, but with your, turning on Dalton Castle, seemingly your comedy would not be, as fitting for that rivalry.
Oh, you'd think, but, I came back to Ring of Honor and, like, I know my number one love is doing comedy wrestling, and you see it in this documentary, and I explain why, and you see the smile on my face doing it. But I came back to Ring of Honor, and like I've been wrestling a long time now, so I realized the situation is when I came back and I challenged Jay for the title, and that wasn't the time to bring comedy, and so I understand that, and so I've been a very serious wrestler for Ring of Honor the last couple months, and I'll do it. It's not my favorite. I don't enjoy it that much. I enjoy being just a goofball. So the shows in San Antonio and Dallas, if you get a chance to watch them on VOD, you see a heel Colt Cabana, but you see a real silly goose out there. So I'm enjoying that. And I think it's something I haven't been a real true heel in years, except for the ICP stuff. So. I think it's going to be a fun little ride.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to checking out those video on demand, and hopefully getting to see you guys wrestle at Final Battle.
And you brought up some of the ICP stuff. You wrestle around the world at the smallest places and the largest places. What makes you accept a job or a show? Is there anything that you have like that's like off limits? You're like, no, I won't do this, or you're kind of game for anything.
That's why I'm like, this is my bread and butter, man.
The
weirder, the better. Like, like I'm. It's just, and it's almost, it might almost be because I know I have it'll make for a story. I can talk about it on the podcast. It's something that I can remember. It's something I could share in the locker room the next week. Being like, dude, you know where I was at, or guess what happened? Like, I'm at the point now where, like, I'm doing pretty financially. I'm doing pretty well. So some of these I'm just taking for the stories, man, just for the life experiences, and I love it. I'll do anything, man. And that's because that's how I was in the beginning, and like I fell in love with it. Some people can't stand it, but indie wrestling is the best, man. There's just so many good ones and so many bad ones and so much in between. Like I have the Pro Wrestling Fringe podcast on Howl.fm, and in the beginning to each of them, I just talk about how like I say I've wrestled at fat camps and I've wrestled with the Inuits, northernmost part of Canada, and I've wrestled with the Aborigines in Australia, in front of the Yakuza in Japan. It's just like, that's what life's about, it's just getting out there and just doing everything. So I'm so happy that wrestling can take me to these weird, wild experiences, especially because like I love, like, that's what all I'm fascinated about as a kid or a teenager, reading those PWI magazines in like junior high school and being like, that's the life I want. And it was not only like I want to be like a big WWF superstar, but I was also like, I want to wrestle like USWA at 6 a.m. in Memphis. You know?
So, now that you have the Wrestling Road Diaries 3 coming out, what other release dates you want to share that with our fans and listeners?
Well, I'm shipping the DVDs out now, and you can get a free autograph with the first 1,000 ones that go out. So there's still a bunch left. So you can get those. I'm shipping them out right now. ColtMerch.com. November 6th is the shipping date, and digital November 11th. DigitalColt.com. And I took a different approach this time. I kind of did a big pre-sale, trying to get a little hoopla before they came out. So there's going to be a big, pre and post release date. So I'm excited, and the sales have been really good, and no one's really seen it yet. So I'm super excited for people to really really watch the movie.
Yeah, I know we're definitely looking forward to getting our copies and watching them ourselves. I've probably watched Road Diaries 1 and 2 100 times each. They're some of the most naturally funny and cool things to see from a wrestling fan who wants to really follow the journeys of these guys that they pay their money to see, or who bring so much enjoyment to them. So just on behalf of everyone, I'll say thank you, Colt, for giving us the podcast and these Road Diaries and all of this insight into the world that we all love.
Yeah, WWE does. They produce so much cool shit. They really do, and I'll give them credit for that. And there's a lot of cool stuff, but like this, and I'm talking about stuff outside of the ring, in terms of I guess content, or maybe like the Edge and Christian show, or Ride Along, or whatever it might be, talking smack. So I love the idea of this content outside of that, and there's not much like high quality stuff, and like hopefully mine's part of it. But like whenever I see like Vice, when Vice put out that documentary about that's just like more of that. That's what I'm looking for, more of that. And so hopefully like that's what these Road Diaries series are, is like more of that. That's like the real stuff, the good, well produced stuff that isn't the WWE, and that isn't like watered down with whatever they're trying to sell.
And Colt, I'm very excited to be able to ask you this. Where are you at on the internet?
Hey, all right. The movie is at ColtMerch.com, and that's where you can pick that up. I'm very excited about that. My Twitter and Instagram is at Colt Cabana. ColtCabana.com is my website. I'm doing a comedy show with Marty DeRosa in Chicago the night before Thanksgiving. And all my appearance dates are at ColtCabana.com. And anything else? I don't know. I have a lot of stuff, but that's good for now.
No more Vine, right? No more Vine?
Oh, my God. It's still out. I'm still watching them.
Well, Colt, thank you so much.
The podcast is Art of Wrestling every Thursday on iTunes. Please subscribe.
All right. Well, once again, I just want to thank you so much for your time tonight, and I just want to remind everyone, go out and pick up Wrestling Road Diaries 3. It's going to be fantastic. I can tell you before we even take a look at it, and I hope everyone had a good time.
Yeah, and shout out to Jack Ettinger, who's actually the editor and director of it, too.
Absolutely.
He's amazing. He did the second one and this one, too, and he's great.
All right. Thank you very much, Colt.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and make sure to check out Running Wild Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Store, and SoundCloud for full episodes. Follow us on Twitter at RunningWildLWOS, and visit our website at runningwildpodcast.com.